The wind was sharp on the ruined planet of Durasix, carrying the scent of smoke and death. Broken ships lay scattered like skeletons on the muddy battlefield, their metal bones rusting in silence. It had been years since the war ended, but the ground still remembered. Jack Trenton, a human scavenger, walked slowly through the muck. His boots sank with each step. He was alone, as always. Mechanic by trade, he came to this forgotten world looking for old tech, lost machines, or parts he could sell. He wiped sweat from his forehead and squinted at a shattered shuttle in the distance. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. Time to pack up. But then, he saw something move just ahead, near a pool of water and thick mud. Something shifted, barely noticeable. Jack raised his tool gun cautiously. Was it a dying animal? A trap? He stepped closer and stopped. It was a woman, an alien woman. She was kneeling, barely conscious, her head hanging low, her body shaking. Her skin was a deep violet, but it was hard to tell because she was completely covered in mud. Arms, legs, face, even her long matted hair. Only her pointed ears and faint breathing proved she was alive. Jack froze. She wasn't wearing much, just torn scraps of clothing. Old military gear, maybe. Her hands were dug into the mud like she had tried to crawl. Her body looked thin, starved. Abandoned. Others might have walked away. In fact, someone clearly had. Gosh. She had been left here like trash. But Jack didn't move away. He slowly lowered his tool gun and stepped forward. "Hey," he said quietly. "You alive?" The woman flinched at the sound of his voice. Her head jerked slightly, but she didn't answer. Jack kneeled slowly beside her and reached into his pack. He pulled out his emergency water purifier and attached the small hose. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. Still, she said nothing. He gently aimed the water sprayer at her arms and pressed the nozzle. Clear water sprayed over her skin, washing away thick layers of mud. She gasped. Her eyes opened bright. Glowing eyes with a golden huand locked on his face. She looked terrified, like a creature expecting pain. "It's okay," Jack whispered. "I just want to help." The woman didn't speak, but she didn't run either. She stayed on her knees, trembling, while Jack carefully washed away the mud from her arms and shoulders. Her skin was marked with bruises, old scars. She had been through something terrible. Jack felt a lump in his throat. Who would do this? He washed her face gently, and for the first time, her features became visible. She was young, maybe in her early 20s. Despite the dirt and pain, she was beautiful. Not in a normal way, alien and strange, but there was something innocent. About her eyes, something broken, but not gone. "You don't have to be scared," he said. She just stared at him. Night was coming, and the cold wind picked up. Jack helped her to her feet. She stumbled, and he caught her carefully. She weighed almost nothing. "I've got a small camp," he said, "just nearby. It's not much, but you'll be safe." He didn't know if she understood. A 20? Started walking, she followed, barefoot and silent. Mud dripping from her body with each step. At his camp, Jack lit a small fire and handed her a heat blanket. She wrapped it around herself, shivering. He cooked something simple, protein stew. From a can, she ate like she hadn't tasted food in days. Her hands shook, her fingers trembling as she held the bowl. Not once did she speak. Jack didn't push her. He just sat beside the fire, fixing a broken drone while she watched him from under the blanket. "You've got a name?" he asked gently. Silence. "I'll call you Mira," he said. "That okay?" She blinked then, slowly. She nodded. Jack smiled faintly. "All right, Mira. Let's figure this out together." Later that night, Jack sat by the fire, unable to sleep. He looked over at the sleeping alien girl beside him. She curled up in the blanket like a child. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know why she had been left behind, but he did know. She deserved better than to die alone in the mud, and he was going to make sure she got it. The morning came quietly on the dead world of Durasix. Ash floated in the air like snow. The skies were a dull gray, and the land still smelled of rusted metal and burned dreams. Jack opened his eyes slowly, rubbing the tiredness away. The fire had burned low, just soft red embers now. He sat up and looked around. Mira was gone. His heart jumped. He stood quickly and grabbed his jacket. "Myra," he called, stepping past the rocks. No answer. He searched the camp, then ran toward the wreckage nearby. His boots splashed through cold puddles of mud and oil. Then he saw her just outside the camp, crouching near an old engine part, her bare hands trembling. Jack slowed down. "Hey, you okay?" Myra flinched and took a step back. He stopped immediately, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay. I didn't mean to scare you." She stared at him, breathing fast like a trapped animal. Her hair was cleaner now, falling around her face in wet strands. The bruises on her arms were more visible under the morning light. "I thought maybe you ran off," Jack said, carefully kneeling. "You didn't have to." Mira didn't speak. She just watched him with those bright golden eyes, unsure. She was holding something in her hand, a sharp piece of metal, jagged like a broken knife. Jack saw it. He didn't react. He just nodded slowly. "I get it," he said. "Up. You don't trust me." She didn't move. "I don't blame you." The silence stretched between them, thick like fog. He sat down fully in the mud, right in front of her. "I won't touch you. I won't hurt you. I just want to help." Myra's fingers slowly released the sharp metal. It dropped softly into the mud. Back at camp, Jack poured warm water into a basin. Mira sat a few feet away, knees pulled to her chest. She didn't speak, but her eyes never left his hands. He handed her a clean rag. "Here, you can finish cleaning up if you want." She stared at the rag, then slowly reached out and took it. Jack turned his back to give her privacy. He started working on a broken solar panel while she cleaned herself quietly behind him. She didn't trust him yet. That was clear, but she hadn't. Run. That was something. Later, Jack opened a pack of ration bars. He handed one to Mira. She sniffed it first, then took a cautious bite. She chewed slowly, eyes still wary, like she expected him to snatch it away. He smiled gently. "You know, you eat like a cat I once had. Always scared, always watching." Mira blinked. "A cat," he repeated, pointing to himself. "Small animal. Furry, likes to knock things off tables." Surprisingly, her lips twitched just the smallest smile. Then it was gone. But Jack saw it. That night, Jack sat at the fire again, trying to repair a small drone's circuit board. Mira sat across from him, wrapped in the heat blanket, holding the translator device he had found earlier. "It should work," Jack said. "If I can get this battery connected." He clicked the final wire into place. A soft blue light blinked on the side of the translator. Myra jumped slightly. Jack held it up gently. "It goes on your ear," he said. She hesitated. "I won't force you," he added. "But it might help. You can speak. I can understand." After a long moment, Mira leaned forward and let him place it on her ear. The device buzzed softly, syncing with her natural frequency. Then, silence. She looked down at the fire. Finally, in a soft, broken voice, the translator spoke for her. "Why? Didn't you hurt me?" Jack froze. Her voice was so small, so full of pain, that he felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "Because you've already had enough hurt," he said quietly. "You don't deserve more." Myra blinked rapidly. Her eyes filled with water, but she didn't let it fall. She whispered again. Others laughed when I cried. Jack swallowed hard. I'm not like them. Later, as the fire faded to glowing orange, Jack lay awake on the ground roll. He stared at the stars above dull behind the clouds and dust. Behind him, Myra slept curled up, blanket tight around her body. But her voice from earlier echoed in his mind. Why didn't you hurt me? That question said everything. Whatever she had been through, it was enough to break most people. Yet somehow, she was still breathing, still alive, still fighting. Jack closed his eyes and whispered to himself, whoever did this to her. If I ever meet them, they won't walk away. And he meant it. The wind had changed direction by morning. It carried the smell of something burned and something else, smoke. And Metal Jack stood outside the small shelter he had made from broken ship panels. The sun tried to rise behind the thick clouds, but failed. The world still looked gray, like it didn't want to wake up. Inside, Mira sat on a makeshift bed. Her skin looked cleaner now. The bruises were still there, but the mud was gone. Her hair hung over her shoulders like silver thread, and her eyes. They were watching Jack, always watching. He placed a warm metal cup near her. Hydration tea, he said. No taste, but it's good for your body. She stared at the cup. Jack smiled. It's not poisoned. Slowly, Mira picked it up and took a small sip. He sat across from her and turned on the small light built into the floor panel. It glowed softly between them. You slept through the night, he said. That's progress. She didn't respond, but her translator device blinked blue. It was working. Jack leaned back. I want to know your story, Mira, but only if you want to share it. She stayed silent. Then, after a pause, her voice came through the translator. You cleaned me. Jack nodded slowly. Yeah, you were covered in mud. Mira looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. No one ever did that. Not even my own kind. That silence returned, but it wasn't heavy this time. It felt like the space between two people about to share something deep. Jack waited. Finally, Mira spoke again, her voice cracking slightly. They left me because I was broken. Not strong, not useful. Jack frowned. Who left you? She touched her chest. My owners. Then the soldiers. Then everyone. He leaned forward. Owners, you mean? They treated you like property. She nodded. I was sold. Many times. I don't remember the first one. I was too young. Jack clenched his fist. His stomach turned. He didn't say anything, but Mira saw the storm in his face. You are angry, she said softly. I'm trying not to be, Jack replied, forcing his voice calm. But yeah, I'm angry. Why? Because no person, no alien, no being dies to be thrown away like garbage. Mira lowered her eyes again. Her hands gripped the blanket. They didn't throw me away. They buried me in the mud. Said it would hide the shame of me. Jack stood up. He paced for a moment, running his hand through his hair. He wanted to scream. But he de-danned single quotes. Instead, he walked over to the table where he had left something the night before. A small case. He opened it and brought out a mirror. It was scratched and old, but it worked. He held it in front of her. Look at yourself, he said. Mira hesitated. Then looked. She stared at her reflection for a long time. Her eyes widened. Maybe she hadn't seen her face in months. Maybe years. You see that? Jack said quietly. That's not shame. That's someone who survived. That's someone stronger than the ones who tried to break her. Myra blinked. Her lip trembled. And then, tears fell. She didn't cry loudly. No sobs. Just silent tears falling down her cheeks. Jack sat beside her and offered a clean cloth. She took it. "Thank you," she whispered. Later, Jack was outside working on the broken scout ship. The antenna was twisted. The fuel lines were clogged. The ship was useless. For now, but he liked fixing things. Even if it took time, behind him, soft footsteps. Myra walked closer, holding a small pouch. She had tied the blanket around her shoulders like a cape. "You fix machines?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Used to work on colony transports. I'm good with junk." She watched him for a moment, then held out the pouch. Inside was a small memory core, very old, but intact. "I found this," she said, "hidden in the mud. It's mine." Jack took it carefully. "What's on it?" "My name," she said. "My true name. And the reason they feared me." Jack looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" She glanced around as if afraid someone might be listening. Then she whispered, "I was not just a slave. I was a scientist's daughter. I knew secrets they wanted hidden." Jack looked down at the core, and suddenly the pieces clicked. They didn't just abandon her. They buried her to silence her. That night, as the wind howled and firelight danced on metal walls, Jack sat with Mira again. "You're not broken," he said. "You're dangerous to them. That's why they buried you." Mira nodded. "But you uncovered me." He smiled faintly. "Guess I just like fixing things." She looked at him, her golden eyes now clear of mud, but full of emotion. "Maybe," she said softly, "you're the first human who ever saw me." The night air on Durasix was colder than usual. Jack stood beside the old scout ship, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had finally repaired the antenna and boosted the signal range. His emergency beacon now reached out beyond the nearest moon. Maybe someone would hear it inside the shelter. Myra sat quietly, staring into the fire. Her expression was unreadable. The small memory core rested in her lap like a heavy secret. The flames flickered against her skin, making her look like a ghost from a forgotten world. Jack stepped back inside. Beacon's working. Might take a day, maybe more, but someone will hear it. Myra didn't look up. And if they come, Jack sat across from her. "Then we ask for help." She finally raised her eyes. "Not everyone who hears the signal will come to help." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She looked at the fire again. "The last time someone came for me, attained me." Jack frowned, thinking about her words, and that's when it happened. A sharp beep echoed from the beacon console. Jack turned fast. Coming signal, local, low range, moving fast. Someone had heard them. He rushed outside, looked to the sky, and froze. 3 ships, dark and low, hovered above the trees. Sleek, military, alien-made. They were not here for rescue. They were hunting. The ships landed hard in the clearing. Dust and ash flew up like a storm. Jack raised his rifle, but kept it pointed down, ready to start a fight. Mira stood behind him, her blanket tight around her shoulders. The ship doors opened. 4 figures stepped out, Talian soldiers in dark red armor. Their helmets had glowing green visors, and their rifles were already raised. The lead soldier took a step forward. "Human male." The voice boomed through a translator. "Step aside. That creature belongs to us." Jack's grip on the rifle tightened. She's not a creature. She's not a thing. And she doesn't belong to anyone. The soldiers didn't move. The tension in the air grew thick. Myra whispered behind him, "They're from House Calrex. They used to own me." The lead soldier raised his weapon higher. "This is your only warning. Hand her over, or be marked as a traitor." Jack looked at Mira. She was shaking. He turned back. "Go to hell." The silence that followed was short. The first shot hit the ground near Jack's foot. A warning. But Jack didn't back away. He raised his rifle slowly. You think I'm afraid to die protecting her?" The soldiers hesitated. Jack didn't know what made them pause: his voice, his stance, or the fire in his eyes, but they didn't move forward. And then, something strange happened. Mira stepped out from behind him. She stood between Jack and the soldiers, barefoot, trembling, but tall. She spoke in her native tongue, no translator, just raw sound. The soldiers froze. Her voice was soft, but carried power, like ancient words, full of meaning. It wasn't a scream or a threat, it was a command. One of the soldiers lowered his rifle. The lead one shouted something back in the same language. Clearly angry. Myra raised her hand and said something again. This time, sharper. The soldier behind the leader dropped to one knee. Jack watched, stunned. "What's happening?" he whispered. Mira turned to him. Her voice translated clearly now. "I told them who I really am." Jack blinked. "And who's that?" She didn't answer. But the lead soldier growled, "You have no right. You were erased." Mira took a step forward. "You buried me in mud because you were afraid of the truth. But I'm still here." Jack moved beside her. "If she's telling the truth, then you're the criminals here." The lead soldier raised his weapon again. "I should have finished you when I had the chance." Myra didn't flinch. "Then do it now," she said, "and prove to the galaxy that even truth makes you afraid." For a moment, no one breathed, and then the soldiers backed away. "Fall back." The leader shouted, "Let the bounty hunters deal with this." The ships roared to life, dust rising again, and then they lifted into the sky and disappeared into the dark clouds. Back at the camp, Jack stared at Mira, his heart still racing. "What did you say to them?" She sat down slowly, the firelight flickering in her eyes. "I spoke in the old tongue, language of my bloodline. Only highborns are taught it." Jack sat beside her. "So you're not just a scientist's daughter." She shook her head. "I'm heir to one of the old noble lines. My voice alone can command soldiers if they recognize my rank." Jack exhaled slowly. "No wonder they tried to bury you." Myra looked at him with something new in her eye strength. "They didn't bury me deep enough," she said. He smiled. "No, they didn't." The campfire crackled softly as the night dragged on. Jack sat close to the flame, trying to stay warm, while Mira leaned back against the broken wing of a downed shuttle. Her eyes weren't sleepy, just distant, like she was remembering something. Far away, Jack stirred the fire with a stick. "So you were born into one of those royal houses?" Myra didn't answer right away. She was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. "Yes, but not the kind of royalty you see in stories. It wasn't crowns and gowns. It was labs, decisions, and secrets." Jack tilted his head. "You're saying you weren't a princess?" "I was a scientist's daughter," she said softly. "But in our culture, that meant power. My bloodline was protected until the war came. Then, everything changed." Jack leaned forward. "They turned on you." Mira nodded. "The scientists who raised me were ordered to erase me. They didn't. They helped me escape, but I was caught. Sold, moved from ship to ship. I was made to forget who I was." Jack looked down at the memory core in her hand. "But you remembered enough to hide that." Mira nodded. "I buried it myself, in the mud, near the wreck." Just before they left me, Jack shook his head. "They were trying to erase proof that you ever existed. They almost did." The next morning, Mira watched as Jack connected the memory core to his old repair terminal. It hummed to life, slowly translating the alien language into basic symbols. Jack leaned over the screen. "There's a locked file here. Heavy encryption." Mira placed her hand on the device. A soft glow came from her skin, and the file opened. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Biometric lock. Impressive." The screen displayed old reports, research logs, bloodline data, genetic maps. But at the bottom was something strange. A name, Myra Volume Tellian, Noble Class, Level Black Clearance. Jack stared at it. "You're a key, aren't you?" Myra frowned. "A key." He nodded. This planet was a battleground because of something. Hidden here, you were born with access. You're the only one left who can open it. She looked away, and they wanted me gone. Because I could reveal the truth. Jack stood up. That means they'll come again. Not just soldiers. Not just bounty hunters. People with power. People who kill silently. Myra didn't argue. She already knew. That night, Jack worked on the emergency shuttle's engine. He knew time was short. The parts weren't perfect. But he could make it fly just once as he connected wires. Myra approached with something wrapped in cloth. "I found this in the wreck," she said, handing it to him. Jack opened it. Inside was an old alien weapon half-blade, half-energy device. He whistled. "This is military grade and beautiful." Myra nodded. "It belonged to my mother. She trained with it before she was taken." Jack handed it back. "You should. Keep it." Myra looked uncertain. "I haven't held a weapon in years." "Then maybe it's time to remember who you are." The next morning, a soft warning sound beeped from Jack's scanner. Unregistered ship. Low orbit. Slow descent. Myra stood behind him, watching the red light blink. "Bounty hunters?" she whispered. Jack nodded. "We don't have much time." He looked at her, really looked. She was no longer the trembling girl covered in mud. Her posture was stronger, her eyes sharper, her voice steady. But he also saw the weight on her shoulders. "You don't have to face them alone," Jack said. She turned to him. "I won't run." "You sure?" "I'm tired of running." Jack smiled faintly. "Then we fight." Together, they loaded the small shuttle with supplies, tools, and the memory core. It wasn't about escape, now it was about revealing the truth. About taking back her voice. As the ship overhead got closer, Myra stood at the cliff edge, wind blowing through her silver hair. She held the blade in one hand. In the other, a small transmitter. Jack stepped beside her. "If we upload that data to the orbital net, it'll reach the whole system." Myra nodded. "Let them all see what they tried to hide." Jack looked at her and smiled. "You know, for someone they called worthless, you're more important than half the galaxy." She glanced at him. "You cleaned mud from my skin, Jack, but you also cleaned lies from my name." Jack looked toward the ship above. "A time to make the galaxy listen." As the bounty ship hovered low, engines glowing and weapons locking on, Myra held the transmitter tight. The moment the hunters stepped onto the battlefield, she pressed send, and the truth finally flew free. The first blaster shot hit the dirt, just inches from Jack's foot. He dove behind a rusted engine block as Myra ducked beside a fallen wing. The bounty hunters weren't here to talk, they were here to silence. 4 of them, heavily armed, faces hidden by black helmets. Moving in fast, like they already knew the layout of the camp. "They were watching us," Jack growled, checking his ammo, waiting for the upload. Myra clutched the transmitter tightly against her chest. "It's halfway sent," she said. "But if they destroy the signal point," Jack nodded grimly, "then it never reaches anyone." Another shot sizzled past, hitting the old antenna, snapping it in half. Sparks flew everywhere. Jack swore under his breath. "We need to get to the backup relay dish." "You said there was one buried in the mud?" Myra nodded. "Near the crash site." "My old ship." "It's deep under, but it should still work." "We'll have to run for it," Jack said. Myra took a breath and stood up. Jack blinked. "You're going first." She looked back at him with steady eyes. "You taught me not to hide anymore." He grinned. "Remind me never to give you a Motivational speech again. They moved fast through the ruined trees and down into the muddy ravine. The bounty hunters were chasing them, shouting in alien tongues. Firing shots that lit up the sky, Mira led the way, feet sliding in the wet ground until she reached the spot. "This is it," she said, kneeling in the mud. Jack arrived seconds later, dropping to his knees beside her. He pulled out a tool and began digging. "How deep?" "It's meters, maybe more." Jack cursed. "Of course it is." But he kept digging. Mira dug too, her hands raw and covered again in wet soil. Her breath came fast. Her muscles ached. But she didn't stop because she remembered being thrown into this mud once. Now she was digging it up with her own hands to send a message that could save others. Minutes later, Jack's tool hit something solid. "Got it," he shouted. He and Myra yanked up the old dish. It was bent and covered in grime, but still held a faint green light. Jack connected it to his portable power unit and handed Mira the transmitter. "Plug it in." She did. The light turned blue. Signal uploading 42%. 56%. ... Then Mira screamed. "Jack!" A shot tore through the dirt beside him. One of the bounty hunters had caught up tall, armored with a heavy plasma cannon on his shoulder. He fired again. Jack tackled Mira to the side. The dish sparked, wires burning. "No," she gasped, the signal. Jack rolled up, drew his weapon, and returned fire. The bounty hunter dropped back, hiding behind a tree. "Mira, get the dish working again." Jack shouted, "I'll hold them." She turned back to the dish, hands shaking as she reconnected the wires. Her fingers moved faster than she thought she could. Upload resumed. 63%. 74%. ... Jack kept firing, pushing the hunters back with short, controlled bursts. But his ammo was running low. Another shot grazed his shoulder. He hissed in pain and dropped to one knee. "Jack." Mira called, but he waved her off. "I'm fine, just buy me 10 more seconds." The final hunter charged at Mira with a blade. Roaring, she turned around and raised her mother's weapon, the blade Jack had restored. She activated it with a soft hum, and then she moved. Not fast, not perfect, but with purpose. The hunter swung. Mira ducked, turned, and drove her blade into the side of his armor. Sparks flew. He collapsed. Jack stared in shock. "Remind me not to make you mad." Mira didn't smile. She just walked back to the dish and hit the final key. Upload complete. Up. Mu. Me. Soft tone rang out. The data had been sent. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a sound above, soft at first. Then louder. Engines. A sleek silver ship broke through the clouds. It hovered above the battlefield. Hand from its center, a signal blinked in response. Mira stared at it. "That's a Royal Archive vessel," she whispered. "They got your message?" Jack asked. She nodded. They didn't just get it. They believed it. The ship lowered a ramp. Soldiers stepped out, but these wore blue. Not the color of warlords or bounty hunters. They kneeled before Mira. She stood frozen. One of the soldiers spoke in her language. His voice humble. "Lady Volumetelian, we are here to bring you home." Jack watched quietly as Mira was offered a ceremonial robe, clean and glowing. The mud on her arms seemed to vanish in the light of the ship. But instead of stepping forward, she turned to Jack. "I sent the message. I uncovered the truth," she said. "But I'm not going alone." Jack blinked. "What do you mean?" She took his hand. "You cleaned my body. But more than that, you helped me remember who I was." The soldiers looked confused. Myra faced them. "He comes with me, as my protector, as my voice among your kind." Jack looked down at their hands, and for the first time since he landed on Dura 6, he felt like he wasn't alone anymore. The ship rose slowly into the dark sky, leaving behind the mud-stained world of Dura-6. Inside, the air was cleaner, warmer. The lights were soft. The noise of war and ruin had faded to silence. Jack stood near the observation window, arms crossed, watching the planet shrink below. His shoulders still ached from the wound, but his thoughts weren't on the pain. They were on Mira. She sat in the center of the royal chamber, dressed now in simple but elegant robes, dark violet, lined with silver. Her hair had been gently brushed and tied behind her head. She looked regal, strong, but her eyes still found him, even in a room full of strangers. The soldiers and officers spoke in hushed voices, some looking confused, others concerned. They had expected a message. They hadn't expected a survivor, and definitely not her. Myra stood slowly as an elder approached. His skin was pale green, his eyes dim but sharp. He wore the mark of the High Council. He bowed. "Lo, my lady Volumtilian, the truth you sent has shaken the empire. You are the last of your line. Your name will rise again." Myra looked at him, calm but clear. "I don't care about the name. I care about what was done to me, and what was done to others like me." The elder nodded. "Those responsible will be brought to justice. The ones who buried you in mud will now kneel in dirt before your name." But Mira didn't smile. Instead, she said, "I want access to the speaker's hall." Gasps filled the room. One of the officers stepped forward. "That hall is for the voice of the people." "I am the people," Mira said. "I was their prisoner, their victim. Now I will be their voice." The elder bowed again. "As you wish, Lady Mira." Later that evening, Jack sat in a quiet room, clean metallic, with soft lights and a bed that didn't smell like oil and ash. He wasn't sure what his place was now. He had spent years fixing broken things. Now, maybe, he had fixed something more. The door opened softly. Mira stepped inside. Her robe was gone. She wore a plain tunic now, her hair loose, simpler, more real. She sat beside him without a word. Jack looked at her. "So, royal halls and speeches, huh? Doesn't sound like you anymore." She tilted her head. "It doesn't sound like the girl covered in mud, either." He chuckled. "Fair." Myra's eyes softened. "You stayed. You asked me to. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Silence. "But a good kind?" Then Myra whispered, "Back on Dura 6, when I was digging in the mud with you, I wasn't thinking about bloodlines or revenge. I was just thinking I didn't want to die alone." Jack looked at her. "You won't?" She smiled for the first time. A week later, the grand chamber on the capital world was full. Thousands watched as Mira stood at the center, surrounded by elders, soldiers, and officials. Her voice echoed through the hall, translated into dozens of languages. "I was sold," she began. "I was chained. I was left in the mud like I was nothing. But I was not nothing, and no one else is either." Eyes widened, Jack watched from the balcony above, arms crossed. Pride in his chest, Mira continued. "For too long, this empire has silenced voices it didn't want to hear. You silenced children, women, outsiders. But you couldn't silence me, because one human picked me up from the dirt and gave me back my name." Gasps again. Shock. But no one dared interrupt her now. "My name is Mira Volumtilian. I am not your weapon. I am not your shame. I am your mirror." And then she looked upright at Jack. He smiled and nodded. Weeks passed. News of Mira's speech traveled across systems. Uprisings began. Stories of others, like her beaten, sold, forgotten, surfaced from every corner of the galaxy. She had lit a spark. But she never left Jack's side. One evening, they stood on a green hill on a peaceful moon. Jack watched the stars. Mira walked beside him, barefoot on the grass. "You know," she said quietly, "I don't even remember the faces of the ones who left me in the mud." Jack looked at her. "Good. You don't need to." She turned to him. "But I remember your hands. The way they washed the dirt off my skin. Like I was worth saving." "You were," he said. She looked into his eyes, and for once, she didn't flinch.